At Symphorien-Saavedra Law, we believe that every immigration story is unique. Immigration law is more than just a service, it's our sole and passionate focus. With over 4 decades of combined experience, our dedicated team is here to walk beside you, helping individuals, families, workers, and investors navigate every step of their U.S. journey. We take on small cases, large cases, and everything in between, always adapting with flexibility to meet your needs. Our expertise spans work and investment visas, family immigration, humanitarian visas, asylum and deportation defense, citizenship and nationality, and federal court litigation. At Symphorien-Saavedra Law, we love what we do because for us, immigration isn't just about paperwork, it's about people, dreams, and new beginnings. And we firmly believe your future has no boundaries. Let us guide you toward achieving your goals in the United States.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Frank. So to our introductory, our first ever Facebook Live seminar today. Today we're going to be discussing E-2 visas, how to build your life in the United States. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. My name is Frank Symphorien. I am a board-certified immigration expert and founding partner of Symphorien-Saavedra Law. And I have the privilege of having my good friend, dear friend, and partner, law partner, Melissa Triviño, who is who's my right hand. She's extraordinary in what she does in immigration law here at Symphorien-Saavedra Law. Melissa, anything else you want to add about yourself that I haven't mentioned?
Thank you. Like Frank said, my name is Melissa Triviño, and I handle here immigration law at Symphorien-Saavedra Law, and specifically or focused on business visas, including what we're going to be talking today, which is E-2 visas.
Perfect. And anybody is really fortunate to work with Melissa. She is just amazing at what she does. Just so everyone knows, we're going to try to do these. This is our first monthly webinar on Facebook. We'll probably start doing these about once a month on the second Friday of the month is what we're planning to do. Happy Friday to everyone, by the way. I guess that's the nice thing. Friday, right? So I think we're ready to go ahead and start with our first question. And I'll throw this one to you, Mel. What is an E-2 visa?
So an E-2 visa is a temporary visa that is for a group of applicants, specifically nationals of treaty countries that want to invest a substantial amount into a U.S. business and want to come into the United States to kind of direct and develop that business. So this definitely opens up a lot of applicants that can come in and kind of start their own kind of lifestyle here in the United States.
Yeah. And, I think just to add to that, right, I don't know if we get into another one of the questions already, but there's a lot of countries that qualify for E-2 visa, right? But unfortunately, you do have to have a treaty, and there's a significant number of countries who don't, right? I happen to be Venezuelan, and unfortunately, Venezuela does not have an E-2 treaty with the United States. But, if you have a second nationality, you can also qualify through that second nationality. And sometimes we can use your spouse, right? If your spouse has a second nationality or a different nationality, we can use your spouse nationality to secure an E-2 visa. And I guess for a lot of people out there, because many people are interested in permanent residency in the United States or temporary status, is an E-2 visa a permanent residency route, Melissa?
The E-2 visa alone is not. It is more of a temporary non-immigrant visa, but it does, there is other options like an EB-5 that will lead to residency and that has kind of their own requirements that also involve investments. But the E-2 specifically is more of a temporary visa. You do have, one of the requirements is to have that intent to depart once your E-2 visa expires.
Okay. And I guess, I don't know if this is one of the questions that a lot of people, how long can you stay in the United States with an E-2 temporary visa?
So every country will have its validity or kind of period of the visa itself. Some countries it'd be 5 years typically to have the visa on your stamp, on the stamp on your passport. But the I-94, when you come into the United States, it does give you an authorized period of stay, which you can. It's usually less amount of than the visa years, but it could be the I-94 is the 2 years, the visa could be up to 5 years, but that doesn't mean that you can't depart and come back and just kind of renew that authorized period of stay.
Great. Thank you for that, Melissa. And I'll have everyone know that E-2 visas are one of Melissa's favorite visas, right? Is it still your favorite visa?
It is still my favorite.
And let me ask you this. Why is it your favorite visa? Is there a particular reason?
I think it's very unique. Every country and every consulate will kind of look at different options, but I think it's pretty cool to come into the United States and kind of start and own your business and be able to be here to direct it, to develop it and have kind of start your life here in the United States based on this.
It's really cool to be a part of that, right? You get to be a part of somebody's new beginning in the United States. So yeah, I think I understand why you like it. I think we have another question. I think we're ready for a second question. All right, we kind of covered this a little bit, but we'll go into a little bit further, right? Who qualifies for an E-2 visa amount?
So again, being a national of this treaty country, or as you mentioned, if you have a spouse, that can also, we can go with the spouse's nationality. The applicant has to own and direct or control a U.S. real operating business. They have to invest a substantial amount. And that means, putting the funds at risk, and they have to be a lawful kind of way of paying these funds or getting the funds to pay or buy the business. And you have to prove that the company is not marginal. And then you, again, have to have that intent to depart the United States.
Excellent. Excellent. And I guess we'll go through the next questions. I think we have it ready. How does the consulate define a marginal business? That's a good question.
Yeah. So your business has to generate enough income to support not only the family, the applicant and his or her family, but also has to kind of create jobs and kind of have that economic contribution into the U.S. Usually they do give you a period of up to 5 years to be able to show that the business is generating that amount. So it's not something that has to be shown from the very beginning. So if it's a new business, you don't have to show that income yet, but you do have to obviously develop it to get to that point where it's going to support more than just the applicant and the applicant's family.
And I think the FAM, one of the coolest things about working with the E-2 visas is, you have the foreign affair manuals, which gives specific guidance to each consul. I think the language they use is that it has to have the capacity or the potential to create a significant economic impact, right? I think we're getting to this question probably in a minute, whether you have to employ U.S. workers. And this is the cool thing about doing immigration law. You can kind of be creative. For the most part, right, I think we prefer to have employees, especially right now where we got this America First policy, right, with this sort of mantra of making sure that everything is in the United States interest. And so, you sort of can think, it appears as though a lot of the officers are looking for what's the United States interest, how are we benefiting, how are the U.S. workers benefiting? So it's good to have that. But at its core, I do think the foreign affair manuals, and we process some cases this way, where even if you don't have employees from the get-go, if you show that you have the potential or the capacity to create a significant economic impact, you can still establish that the business is not marginal, right?
Correct. Yeah. And that's where that kind of 5-year mark, you want to have that goal in that company to kind of further develop and further grow, because you do have to show that, even in the renewal stage, you want to be able to show that you have been able to grow that company and have that economic impact. But I'll throw the next question to you, Frank.
Right.
Is it better to start a business from scratch or buy an existing one? And what risks should be considered?
So this is one that I kind of go back and forth because it really depends on your goals. I think for the most part, I think starting a business is probably more likely to be successful because, you know, you are putting the money at risk. One of the requirements is that the money has to be at risk. And the government wants to see that you're in the process of investing or actively in the process of investing and having that economic impact, right? That you have invested or in the process. And so if you start the business and you are growing, it's clear that you're putting the money at risk, right? And you're creating that economic impact. Obviously, sometimes it takes time. But if you start the business, I don't think the government can ever argue that your money is not at risk, right? Some of the consulates out there will give you a problem if you buy an existing business, because usually what we've done when you're buying an existing business is we'll have a contingency agreement, right, with an escrow account of some sort, where, you know, the money's put in escrow and the purchase of the business is contingent on the issuance of a visa, right? And I like this option too, because it creates a significant, you know, measure of certainty for you if you're the investor, right? I mean, nobody wants to invest $150,000 into the United States economy. You don't have a visa yet, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get the visa, right? But there's this sort of chicken or the egg, what comes first situation here, because if you don't put the money, it makes it less likely that you will actually get the visa, right? But you know, who wants to put all the money without getting the visa first, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's tough for a lot of business owners. We've also done it where we have the contingency agreements, and some of the consulates are a little bit more problematic, right? With contingency agreements, they want to make sure that the money is going to be fully executed, and that there's no way for you to revoke that agreement once you get the visa, right? Because unfortunately, there's a lot of fraud out there, and sometimes you'll have people who will get the visa and then they'll close the business, or the business will never actually take off, right? Will never even start to operate. So they scrutinize the contingency agreement, the escrow account that you have with the third party, to make sure that the business will actually take off and create those impacts. Obviously that's the very purpose of your visa. And so you have to follow through and make sure that you invest. So I think, from a security standpoint, I like the escrow agreements in terms of, purchasing a new one and the security, right? Probably if I was an investor, I'd want to do the escrow agreement and so forth. But if you want a higher measure of certainty, it's kind of like, maybe in a relationship or anything, right? The best way to make sure that your relationship thrives is to put yourself all in, right? Because if you're kind of out and you're not fully committed to it, it's probably not going to work. And I think the visas are sort of that way as well, right? I think you kind of have to commit yourself to it. And when the government sees that you're fully committed, you're invested, you put all your money in it, you're doing everything you can to get it running, you've hired a manager, you've secured facilities that are sufficient for the enterprise, and you started, created a bank account, you're starting to, make those agreements to get the business running, then I think the more likely it is that you're going to get a visa, as opposed to where it's an escrow. I think it's sort of easier to deny the visa if you don't see how that money is being deployed and how that economic impact is starting to develop. What do you think, Mallory? What do you think?
I agree. Sometimes when you're buying an existing business, you don't know what it kind of comes along with it. It could be, dead in there, and you don't really know what you're buying sometimes. So, it's very risky sometimes to buy a business. It does sometimes, you're able to show operating costs, and you're able to even show income sometimes, which obviously a newer business, or if you're starting something, you're not going to be able to show that. But we have been able to kind of move forward with both scenarios. I think definitely, even with new businesses, you want to kind of, or we look into business plans to kind of have that outlined already, to be able to show the government that that's the idea of how we're going to move forward with the company. So, I think both scenarios work for e-visas. So we're not limited to just one type. We just have to look at the pros and cons of each process.
And I think it's just different depending on the investor, right? Your risk tolerance, how committed, how significant or important, like how invested, how how committed are you to getting to the United States? So if you're fully in, I mean, I tend to think that going all in and starting your business, I mean, I think it probably has a better chance than doing the escrow agreement and the purchases. But, you know, it does have the higher risk. So, you know, it just depends on the circumstances of where you're at. It has a higher risk from an economic standpoint, right? As far as the potential, if you go to a visa and you go to a consulate, you get denied, then what do you do now? Although, you know, the other thing that I think is significant about starting your own business is that you also probably can control your profits better, right? Like you can kind of, if you have a good business plan, and this is one of those things that out there, you know, should you hire, one of those other questions that we always get, should you hire a business plan writer to develop your case? And we've done it both ways, right? We work with really good business plan writers, but I think the critical point here is to make sure that you are fully involved and fully immersed in the development of that business plan, right? So that when you go to the embassy, the business plan is truthful, it's accurate, you are aware of it, and not only for the initial issuance, but that you understand and are fully involved in deploying and actually fully implementing that business plan over the next 5 years so that you can actually do the renewal, right? Because we find that oftentimes some people will say, well, I hired a business plan, and, you know, they may not even remember. They'll go to the embassy and the officer will ask a question. They won't even know what the business plan said, right? Or you know, they'll hire a business plan writer and they'll go to renew the business visa in 5 years, or you know, come to find out they haven't done very much or any of what was in the business plan, right? And then, you know, we're having to figure out how to scramble and figure out, do we do a new visa altogether, or what do we do? Because the renewal is going to be a bigger challenge if you haven't actually followed through. It's an issue of trust, right? Can the government trust in you in giving you more time if you didn't do any of what you previously told? And, you know, businesses, circumstances change, right? And economic environments change. You know, obviously, a lot of businesses out there are dealing with high inflation, you know, different tariffs, impact of tariffs and so forth. And so you do have to adapt, and some adaptation is expected and it's normal, and we can always deal with that. But you need to be aware and fully involved in understanding what your business plan says, so you can be successful, right? I think that's, I know we have another question probably. Let's see what we got. All right, so how long does an E-2 visa processing take, Mel?
So this can depend depending on which route you want to go. So if you're in the United States and you already are here under another type of legal status, we can do what's called a change of status into an E-2. Or if you are abroad and you wish to have, or if you wish to have the visa stamped on your passport, then you can do everything at the consulate, and then the consulate will obviously have the processing times. If you're in the United States and we're trying to do a change of status, the process is here within the United States. And they have what's called expedited or not premium processing, which will allow for a faster decision for you to remain in the United States versus if you were to leave and go to the consulate and kind of be bound to the processing times of the consulate itself. Obviously, there's pros and cons to both. If you choose to have the visa on your passport, then that does allow you to travel in and out of the United States versus a change of status is just a change of status of here in the United States. Doesn't necessarily allow you to travel freely. You would have to still go to the embassy to get your visa to be able to come back ultimately.
Yeah, and I think this is probably, we're talking about, you know, departing, because I think historically, right, having that freedom of travel, freedom of movement, freedom of commerce, we've kind of always preferred having the client depart the United States to pick up their visa. That way they can, you know, come and go as they please for the next 5 years if it's a country that allows for the 5-year visa. However, I think one of the probably, you know, points of anxiety or concern, I think you're probably hearing from a lot of our clients is, you know, with the multiple travel bans or visa bans by the current administration, how would that impact them? Should they depart and leave? How are you managing that these days, Mel?
So, I mean, we definitely, you know, have that conversation with the clients when they do travel, because that's always going to be a risk. Unfortunately, if you travel outside of the United States, you are asking for permission when you are coming back and traveling to the United States. So definitely we want to make sure that everything is still aligned. You are still, actively working, the business is operating, and that you're able to travel, without, with minimizing the risk to be, of coming back in. So that's something that has to be, case by case. We want to make sure that everything is still on point with the business. If they have that visa to be able to travel, that, they are allowed to travel, it does allow it. But again, we just have to kind of review, make sure that everything is still, good to go.
Yeah. And I think this is one of those things, as you mentioned, that I fully agree with you. It really has to be, depends on a case-by-case basis. The risk is, I will say that I think the risk is higher depending on what historical relationship we've had with the country where you're going, right? Or where you're picking up your visa. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you're from, I would say that countries with which the UK or with which we've had long-standing relationships, developed world countries, where we have very strong ties, bilateral relationships, where there's a lot of commerce back and forth between both countries, Canada, even Mexico, right, and so forth. Certain countries where we have really strong ties. I can't imagine, right, in my lifetime, us, even though, we've had some tit-tats with Canada and so forth, and maybe we want to purchase Greenland with European Union, but it's really hard to imagine visas being barred for people from countries with which we are strong economic partners or with which we have military alliances, right? So I think it really does vary, and it depends a lot on where you come from. But I would probably still advise that if you come from one of the countries where we have that open relationship with strong bilateral ties, then I would say it's still best to secure the E-2 visa so that you have that freedom of movement, and you're not ever worried about, because I think one of the things that we haven't discussed yet is the fact that the foreign consulate in general is considered to have primary jurisdiction over E-2 visas, right? And so you could have a change of status, you file a change of status, you get it approved, you're living here, you start your business, you do it, and then you go home and you have to file for an E-2 visa to get stamped on your passport. And then when you get to the visa, the consulate, part of the reason why they have primary jurisdiction over it is because they're more familiar with the local customs, the treaties, the specific treaty for that country, as well as the source of funds, right? They may have a better means to trace and to track the source of funds to confirm it's lawful. So you go home and then you find out that the local consulate doesn't like the documentation you provided for your funds, or there's some specific issue with your business with that consulate, and now suddenly everything that you poured the past 3 years of your life into is in turmoil. Those situations are sad. I've had some clients from from the UK or certain other countries, where probably not in this situation, maybe not so much as the UK, but you can have a difficult situation where if you do a change of status and you've never exposed your business to the scrutiny of the consulate, then when you leave, you may have a problem because the consulate will scrutinize it. And I think at least, once you get that visa the first time, you've already overcome that scrutiny. And I tend to think, and you tell me if you disagree, but I tend to think that the consulate on renewal will have a bit of a more respect for or deference. We don't have formal deference, but I think there will be more of a deference if the consulate itself has already, reviewed, scrutinized your business plan and your source of funds and so forth. Whereas if you go with, a change of status from USCIS, they know CIS is not familiar with the treaty. They know they don't have access to all the source of funds, verification vetting tools that they may have. And so I think you're more likely, even if you come from the UK or a country that we have traditionally strong relationship with, if the consulate has not vetted your business, you have a little bit of a higher risk of not being able to come back, right?
Definitely. I agree with that. Yeah. When you have, like you said, the approval from USCIS, that isn't really a guarantee that the embassy, when you have to travel, is going to give you that visa. So it is something that
Yeah.
you have to be fully prepared for with all the documentation, and just be ready for any kind of questions or scrutiny.
Yeah, and I think even more so, right? Not in this environment where we're, under this administration, we're looking for extreme vetting, right? Where we're looking for, every possible fraud in all aspects of immigration applications. In many ways, I know that a lot of people are scared to, move forward or do business in the United States. But to me, I think it presents a lot of opportunities for legitimate businesses and good lawyering, right? Because for the most part, I think it exposes the fraudsters or the visa, preparers, and I guess that's the biggest caution I would say. Extreme vetting is real, but it's not eliminating all paths for immigrating to the United States or securing E-2 visas, right? And I think if you have proper legal counsel, expert legal counsel in the field, and you have proper vetting of your documentation and your business is real, then I think you still have a very good chance of securing an E-2 visa. You just want to be careful of the type of advice that you get, and you do want to be prepared to be fully transparent in showing the source of your funds, your business acumen, and your intent in developing that business fully in the United States.
Definitely. And I know that, we may speak about it a little bit later as well if we get to it, but, that's kind of one of the mistakes sometimes when applicants don't move forward with legal counsel from the very beginning, right? That kind of structure of ownership and that kind of, trace of everything that needs to kind of be proven, or, when to meet all of the requirements for the E-2, trace of funds and the ownership structure. Those are kind of, things that from the very beginning, when you have that expert advice, leading and guiding you through the way, we know exactly what needs to be presented when it comes to these kinds of applications. So it's very important to kind of start, and get that guidance from the very beginning so that you don't, make mistakes, because then that's what makes the case a lot difficult and riskier to, get a denial.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as I always sort of tell clients, it's like, bringing a 1980 Volkswagen Beetle to an engineer and saying, "Hey, I already built the car and I want it to run like a, some, Mustang, modern 2025 version," right? An engineer can do the best, to try to work with what you give them, but it's different than if he's involved from the beginning, developing, using everything in his toolbox to make sure that the car is designed, and in this case, your visa is designed from the beginning for success, right? And I would say, probably our success rate when we have where we're involved in the development, initial formation, right, and when we work with a business attorney or a tax preparer to have all the documentation ready in the formation of the business, I mean, I would say probably our success rate is close to 100% as you can, 99% or higher. But obviously that success rate varies significantly when somebody brings us a business that's already been established. The structural formation that immigration requires is not there, and now we're going backwards to create something that wasn't prepared properly from the beginning, right?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, so we'll go with that. And then, and this is a good question that we get all the time, Mel. Can an E-2 visa lead to a green card?
Yeah, so I mean, we did kind of touch base a little bit on this. The E-2 visa, again, is a non-immigrant visa. It's a temporary kind of visa status that you can get. It doesn't directly lead you to a permanent green card. However, there is other options that definitely, once you're here, that you kind of open doors for, including the EB-5. That could be also another option, and that does involve investment as well. There are a little bit more of a kind of a stronger requirements, obviously, because this is leading for more of a permanent resident status versus E-2, which is more of a temporary basis.
Right. And I think, I think it's important to note that there's multiple paths, right? So it's a non-immigrant temporary visa, but there's multiple paths where you can convert an E-2 visa to a green card, whether it's, once you get here, you do a labor cert through a third party or your spouse does, or you do an EB-2 as a multinational corporation, if you retain some ties to a foreign entity, and then you can also have the direct EB5 route, right, which is what you mentioned. If you're able to increase the investment amount, or keep some of the profits over time in the business. There's one of the recent developments is that immigration historically didn't like using retained earnings from the business in order to deploy and to increase your investment into an EB5. But this is one of the things, thanks to the district court decision, we're now able to use return earnings if your business is able to grow significantly over time, and you meet the 1,050,000 threshold or 800,000 threshold, then you can convert this to an EB5 visa and lead to a green card, in addition to all the other paths, right? So the E-2 is a mechanism to get your foot in the door to be here for at least 5 years, and then we can adapt and utilize various different mechanisms to parlay that into permanent residency. I think the key here is to have a plan from the beginning, right? And to have good, strong legal counsel. Don't come here with an E-2 visa and then say, I'll figure it out once I get there. Because you may have, broken ties with a foreign entity or foreign business that might have allowed us to do an EB2 multinational corporation visa, right? And if you kind of working with an attorney from the outset, you can kind of structure your business in a way that positions you for long-term success as a permanent resident.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So that definitely opens doors for you.
Yeah. All right. So I think we've run out of time. This was fun, Melissa. Hopefully you can join us again, and others, please join us next month. I think we're going to do it the second month of February. Please stay tuned on Facebook. And if you need immigration assistance, E-2 business visas, any type of immigration assistance, please contact Melissa Triviño. She is amazing. My trusted partner. You can reach us. The phone number on the screen is 407-802-1717, or you can also find us on social media, on the internet, and on Google at Symphorien-Saavedra, Symphorienlaw.com. Anything else I missed, Mel, that you want to add?
No, it was great. And hopefully we'll get this doing on a monthly basis. Just let us know what you're interested in kind of knowing a little bit more about, and then we can definitely, assist the community, because that's what we're here for. So give us a call, reach out to us, and we're definitely here to, be able to bring you to the United States.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Look forward to seeing you in the near future. All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.